The only time you would see Uhura, when she was on that command deck, Uhura was all business. She's from the United States of Africa. She was expected to be of a level, highest of professional, not just high. On Saturday night, I had been invited as a celebrity guest at an NAACP fundraiser in Beverly Hills. And when I went in, I was being greeted and so glad you could come. And just as I'm seated at the dais and getting ready to turn to other celebrities, one of the promoters walked over behind me and said, Miss Nichols, sorry to bother you. I said, no problem. And he said, well, there's someone who wants to meet you. And he says he's your greatest fan. And I'm smiling. I said, of course. And I'm getting up to turn and said, where is he? He says, right over here. And I'm thinking it's a trekker, maybe a child, maybe a young man. They just someone wants to congratulate him. And so delighted, I turn and I see this man across the room with this brilliant smile, which you didn't often see on his face. And I remember saying to myself, whoever this little trekker is, they're going to have to wait because this is my leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, walking towards me with a smile on his face. And I never met the man, This is like I'm starting to tremble. And he walks to me and he says, with this smile, he says, and puts his hand out and says, yes, Miss Nichols, I am your greatest fan. I thought, what an incredible moment. And he says, I am your greatest fan. And I just was flabbergasted. And he begins to speak about my role on television and the power of Star Trek and how important it is. In the meantime, for the first time in my life, I had no words to say. I couldn't, they wouldn't come out anyway. I'm shaking in front of this man. And he is saying how important Star Trek is to the future. That this man who's written this, who has produced this, has seen the future, and we are there because you are there. He said, you have one of the most important roles. This is a first. It's non-stereotypical, it's brilliant, it's beauty, and it's intelligence. And you do it with warmth and grace. And I'm just standing there watching him, listening to him. I'm thinking the only visions I've seen of this man really are nightly on the news with marching and black people in the South marching and demanding their rights to sit at a lunch counter and coming out, being herded out and having hoses turned on them, dogs, attack dogs turned on, men, women, and children. And this man leading them and marching and the face of all of this, being arrested. Every night I ever saw him, I said, they're going to kill him. It won't happen past this time. But it did. And so he became this power of hope. And here I am playing this character that I'm going to give up. And I said to him, Dr. King, thank you so much. I'm going to miss my co-stars. And before I could say because, he said, what are you talking about? I said that I just told Gene that I'm leaving the show after the first season because I've received, and he said, you cannot. I felt like that little boy who later said, what you talking about, Will? Because I felt like saying, what you talking about, Dr. Martin Luther King? But my mouth just dropped. And he said, you cannot leave. Do you understand? It has been heavenly ordained. This is God's gift and onus for you. You have changed the face of television forever because this is not a black role. It is not a female role. anyone can fill that role. He said it can be filled by a woman of any color, a man. It can be filled by another Klingon or an alien. He said, this is a unique role and a unique point in time that breathes the life of what we are marching for. Equality. He says, beside your chief communications officer, your fourth in command. He knows Star Trek is built on the Air Force ranking, so he knew the rank. And he said, you have no idea the esteem that we hold for you. And I'd start shivering. And I'm just looking at him, and my mouth was quivering. And he said, beside Michelle, you have no idea the power of television. This man has shown us in the 23rd century, this man who's created this man has created a reality. And because it's in the 23rd century and you are chief communications officer, fourth in command of a starship and going on a 5-year mission where no man or woman has gone before, it means that what we are doing today is just the beginning of where we're going, just how far we're going. You cannot leave. Besides, and then he smiles again, Star Trek is the only show that my wife Coretta and I allow our little children to stay up late and watch. And Michelle, I can't go back and tell them this because you are their hero. I couldn't think of anything for the rest of the weekend. I was just shivering. Sometimes I was furious. Sometimes I was crying. Sometimes I just sat numb and thought about it. And I went to Gene Roddenberry on wobbly legs, and I walked into his office, and he was behind that same desk. And he sat there and he looked at me, and I said, Gene, if you still want me to stay, I'll stay. And I told him the story, what had happened to me with Dr. Martin Luther King. And he just looked up at me and didn't say anything for a long time, and a tears rolling down his face, and he said, God bless Dr. Martin Luther King. Someone knows what I'm trying. Someone realizes what I'm trying to achieve.